I'm Jeffrey Goodman. Today we're going to be looking at two concert guitars made by Manuel Rodriguez from Madrid, Spain. About a month ago, when Manuel was in Los Angeles, he was kind enough to leave these two guitars with me in our studio to be able to study and look into them in detail as to their qualities and characteristics. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we decided to use on both guitars strings made by Hannabach, and on this guitar the kind of string is the Hannabach low tension 815 series, and on the next one, the Rosewood guitar that's coming up, it has the Hannabach 815 medium tension. The strings on the guitar are incredibly important to everything that happens, and a guitar that has good strings on it will sound at its best, and a guitar that doesn't will not sound at its best, and in fact can disguise a very good instrument in case it is in there. The first thing other than the strings is to look at the kinds of woods that the instrument is made of. This is an extraordinary instrument in terms of the woods because they're very old, very rare, and absolutely amazing as to characteristics. The body of the instrument is made entirely of ebony. It is an ebony body from Cameroon, and I'm told by Manuel that it comes from about 1920. It's been in his family since that time, going that far back. The top of the guitar is Canadian cedar, and one of the things that is very interesting about it, you can't really see this, but the grain is extremely narrow, and that's always a good sign when we see very narrow grain in the characteristic of the top of the instrument, which is the soundboard, and so much of the quality of the instrument comes from how that soundboard operates. I also want to mention that the strings on the instrument are made by Hannabach, and Hannabach has been kind enough to also support our project of looking into guitars and strings and how they work together. So on this guitar, I've put the Hannabach low tension 815 series string. I think I've got the package. Yeah. So this is the Hannabach 815 series string, and and we'll delve into how the strings work with the instrument for making the sounds in a bit. So this is the first guitar. Just to show you one chord and a few notes, it is an extremely resonant and powerful and lively sound. Now, so it's not something that we can necessarily assess through the audio of a video, but this is a guitar that for someone who is going to be playing in concert halls would be very much considered because it has such a wonderful clarity and power, amplitude, loudness of sound. And that's something that's always helpful to have as a resource. The second guitar is made of, in the back, it's Brazilian rosewood. This rosewood is also very old, and when you see the back is divided into two pieces, you can see something that comes from guitars of an earlier period, or else the woods that have been used to construct it have been archived for a long time. Many guitars today will have three pieces because we don't have wide enough pieces of wood to make a back out of two matched sides. The top of the guitar is also Canadian cedar, and again, as one looks at it, the grain is very, very narrow. Now, one thing that I always like to do with the top is to just, it's a good thing to move your hand over the soundboard and to look for that it is very smooth, that there aren't ripples in it. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of a ripple around the interior bracing from the inside, but it shouldn't be wavy. That would not be a good sign. This guitar happens to be very, very smooth in that respect. This guitar has a traditional finish and with high gloss quality, which you can see. These are not details that have to do with sound, but you can see a highly detailed work on the rosette and all the handwork of inlaying, perforating these inlaid pieces of wood take hours and hours, tremendous amount of time for the maker to be able to do nicely and so forth. So fretboard is ebony, as is the second guitar as well. Now, this guitar is also very, very, very good in terms of its quality of sound. Here's the same E chord that I played on the ebony. Both guitars have a wonderful open high E with great sustain and elongation and great clarity of pitch. And that's something that, one of the basics that we would always look for in a guitar. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the strings. And it's not very obvious, but in reality, the guitar is two coupled acoustic systems. There is the system of the top of the instrument and the body, which are the main vibrating parts, and also the strings themselves. The body of the guitar doesn't have much in the way of pitch. If I tap it like this, you can actually use your tuner and you can find the pitch that the top is more or less tuned to, but it's a thunky percussive kind of pitch, and it doesn't really make the sound. The frequency is created by the vibration of the string. So if I take any particular note and pluck it, what happens when I pluck is that the string goes into vibration. The vibration is sent to the bone of the bridge, and then the mechanical vibrations are spread across the bridge, and the soundboard starts to resonate. It goes up and down like this, and it will resonate differently and uniquely to every different note on the guitar. So all of the pitch is generated by the string itself. So what happens, it happens very quickly, but the first instant of plucking will be the string itself. And then after that, the wood begins to vibrate and add its sound. So for example, that same note, the high D on the first string, let's listen to it with everything open. And now I'm going to show you what it sounds like if I damp the other strings on the guitar, and this will also show you some of the role of the strings. So I'm just going to damp the other strings not being played, and listen to the sound of the D without those strings doing anything. Notice it's a very pure sound, but it does not have the color and timbre that you get when you have the other strings vibrating. So what happens is you pluck, the wood of the top and the body vibrate. Those vibrations also affect all the strings that are not being played. And all of these strings act as a kind of a silent choir that bring color to the sound. So even for an E string, the quality of all the other strings will have an effect on how that E string sounds. So for example, here's an arpeggio of an E major chord on the first string where I'm damping all the other strings. Now I'm going to do the same arpeggio with letting all the strings vibrate. And notice it's a world of difference between the string by itself and versus all the strings being able to vibrate. And the guitar body and the top, along with all of the strings, contribute in a unique way to each different sound. This is part of the reason why the guitar is such a fascinating instrument to listen to and to play and to learn, because we have such an amazing variety of possibilities as to the tone of the instrument through all kinds of things that we can do when we play. So now, one of the things that we should look at to begin with is we want to check to see the physical conditions. So one thing I will do is I will look down from here all the way to the bridge, and I'm going to look at the flatness and straightness of the neck. The neck of the guitar will normally have a slightly concave feature. It should never be convex, bent in the other direction, and it shouldn't be too much. It's just a little bit. That's the normal and what is expected. So if you sight down a guitar and there's something funny in terms of how that neck is shaped, then there's probably a serious defect, and it doesn't matter who the maker was or any other aspects of it. It's a guitar probably to be avoided. So when I look at this, it's in good shape. Then the other thing I wanted to look at to begin with, I want to make sure that the intonation, that is the tuning, is good. And that's something that you can check in great detail using a chromatic tuner, because in reality, one should check each note on each fret of the guitar briefly enough, but to make sure that the fretting is good and that also that the string itself is in good shape. So just to test the string on this, it's very simple. I have this tuned to the E. And then what I want to listen to is the harmonic at the 12th fret. And that should, if the string is true to itself, that should be a very accurate octave. And it sounds very, very accurate to me. Then I'm going to also take that same E and I'm going to play it fretted. So I have the open E, the harmonic, and the 12th fret. And I do that on all 6 strings. If the harmonic is different in pitch to the fretted note, it may be that the string is defective and a little out of tune with itself, and that throws everything off. So you might need to change a string or so here and there until you find strings that are all true enough in pitch to be able to check out the guitar in detail. So now, when I have finished with that, I'm going to look at some of the high-end sounds. And even if you are not that experienced of a player in terms of knowing the fretboard to be able to play a lot of pieces throughout the length of the guitar, everybody can do this. You can play a little chromatic scale and just listen to the pitches on some of the upper strings to see how it sounds, how it feels to you. So here is a few chromatic notes on the high E string, playing the frets from 9, 10, 11, and 12. And what I want to hear, which is what I'm hearing, is a very open, rich, clear sound. Let's try the B string now. Same set of frets. We want the notes to be clear, to sustain, and to be rich in sound. And so far, that sounds good. The hardest string to find a good string and a good quality on the guitar is often the G string. There are reasons for this acoustically, which I won't go into now. But here's the G string. Let's see how it's doing today. And so that sounds open. That is acceptable for a high-level guitar, particularly. Now we're going to switch to the ebony guitar. And I had never seen or listened to, let alone played, a guitar with an ebony body. And it's a very different acoustic characteristic. And it is, I think you'll be able to hear some of those things here. So here it is, the same little chromatic scale. B string now. G. And so that is a pretty open sound. It's very important to look at the sound characteristics of the guitar in each of the basic regions. So the first 4 frets, the 5th position, 5 through 8, and then this 9th position as well as some of the others positions. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now show you a little bit about timbre. And timbre means the sound color. What that boils down to in terms of acoustics is that every vibrating body has a fundamental sound, like here's the E string. So there's that pitch. But there are also a series of overtones or harmonics that while that string is vibrating at this length, it has a natural set of sub-vibrations. So when I have this harmonic, it's vibrating to this length, and so on, all the way up and down the instrument. So a good instrument should have a lot of richness of timbre and harmonics and overtones available to it. So for example, if I start right above the 19th fret, this is a very dark and kind of fluty-like sound. And as I move towards the bridge, you can hear these are so what I want to hear is a wide spectrum of timbres, which this certainly has. When I get too close to the bridge, it's almost all overtones. You don't hear much of the original lowest part of that sound, the fundamental frequency, but you hear a lot of high frequency sounds. And those are all resources of tone and color that we can use. So I'm going to do this quickly, and then I'm going to switch over to the Rosewood guitar, and we can listen together and just have a sense of comparison. Now the same thing on the Rosewood guitar. So this is a very different spectrum of sounds, but there is really a wonderful range of timbre that one can find on this. The tone qualities of this are very much typical and normal for the Brazilian rosewood body and, of course, these Canadian cedar top. And so this is a very traditional sound then. Now, the amplitude is something that's really important, and it's extremely important for people who are giving concerts, because once you get into a large room, we have to have the sound of the instrument be penetrating to the very, very back of the hall. And for that, we need a certain, just like the volume on a hi-fi or any music playing device, we need that. So I just want to show you that the volume appears to our ear differently depending on where you pluck. If I do a nice strong rest stroke, For this, I guess I'll just do a different note. Here's the note B. I can, in the middle of the sound hole, I get that reflection of volume. If I go just to the other side of the rosette, I get there. And then about here, it's gonna lose its volume because the fundamental sound is not as strong. But so you see that's less. Most guitars have a power zone right behind the rosette. So if you really want to sock out some strong sound for some reason, that's a great place to look for that sound. Now, let's look at the same note on the ebony guitar. Very pure. And it carries its amplitude further in towards the bridge. And has strength of sound all the way through. This is a very vibrant instrument in its qualities in that respect. So this amplitude and timbre should be looked at on all the different strings. Take your time. So for instance, let's listen to the fifth string in this way. So there's a few of the bass note melody notes of the Villalobos Prelude number 1. And now we come to the Rosewood, and let's try the same set of notes. And so I think that the ebony guitar is objectively has greater amplitude. This guitar has plenty in reserve, so there's a lot of ways of creating the volume, but the ebony is a little bit stronger in terms of amplitude in that passage on that set of notes from the Villalobos there. Okay, so when you take the guitar, one of the things is also, and this is so important, is how does the neck feel to you? This is a very personal, individual thing. How does it feel to play? How does it strike you? And you'll have an intuitive feeling that's separate from all the analytical parts of what you may do that is extremely important. And the bottom line is, no matter what the objective characteristics, if it doesn't touch you, if it doesn't make you want to take that guitar to your home and to play it for hours and hours a day at a time, then maybe that's not quite the right guitar for you. And one has to go through sometimes many guitars to find just the right guitar for whatever your price range is in terms of when you're looking. So now, one of the things that we need to be able to do, and I think short music passages are good for this, we need to be able to see how the strings sound together. And here's a little beginning of a little anonymous Renaissance fugue, and I'll play a few bars of it, and you're going to hear the same thematic idea, which is this. First on the E string, and then you can hear on the B string, you're going to hear this. And then you're going to hear it also later on. So we'll hear the same idea in the exposition of the fugue, and let's see how that goes. So that's the exposition of the fugue, and you get a really nice spectrum of sound from the first string down to the sixth. I'm very, very interested in any guitar that I play, in the clarity of pitch, particularly in the first position where it can get muddy very fast. So here's that last chord. And the individual notes are as a chord. Now, for my ear, it's very easy and very clear to pick that up. So that's does very nicely. Now we're going to take the same passage and play it on the ebony guitar and see how that sounds on the guitar, and then we can perhaps compare them and see what we think. And this one, I like this one more than the Rosewood guitar. It has a clarity and a kind of a brightness of and acoustic energy that's pretty exciting to play. The Rosewood is fine. This one, just personally, I prefer it on that passage a little bit more. So we need to look at a lot of different ways that music works. So one thing, for example, would be, let's take the melody notes of the famous Romance d'Amour, the first part of it. And so here we have these melody notes. I'm still on the ebony guitar. So there's the melody. This E string is really a stick of dynamite. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, when I play the accompaniment, I want the melody note, that first string note, to have a natural hierarchy where it's a little bit stronger, and for the accompaniment to be present but a little bit subdued. And see if I can do something with that. So let's immediately try the same passage in the same way on guitar number 2. And the reason why I have 2 guitars is I think it's always important when you're looking at guitars and you're considering purchasing one guitar, have a couple that you're looking at, because there's huge things that can be revealed to you in terms of qualities and also defects or limitations when you start comparing. If you play only one guitar exclusively while you're looking at things, then you're not going to have as good of a foundation for comparison. So here is the Romance melody on the single string. And that's a very rich, very very full sounding with a lot of potentials for shaping the tonality of it. Now here is the same passage with the accompaniment added, and let's listen to that. And so what's interesting to me as I play this, I very much like the sound of both guitars. This guitar has a little bit of romance in it, and you can feel the nostalgia, the heartbreak, and the human quality of intense emotion seems to come right to the surface. This guitar likes to play the romance. Now I'm going to come back to the ebony guitar, and I'm going to play a little bit of the Prelude in D minor by the French composer Robert DeVisee. He was the court guitarist of Louis XIV. I'll do that another time. Let's see what happens with that. I'll play it a little bit more over the sound hole. Let's try the same passage on the rosewood guitar and see what happens with that. One more time. So here in this passage, on both guitars, we're hearing how the inner strings, the B and the G strings, sound from the 10th fret back to the first position. And what we want to hear is smoothness and coherence, and also that when we're playing the thirds that you come to here, single notes, that third, we want the third to be clear in pitch, not fuzzy. Those two pitches. So when you hear them as a chord, it should be very easy to hear which it is, on both guitars actually. Both of those notes of those intervals. So now we have two more little segments to look at, and here is a little bit of the Sor Etude in B minor. And in this one, Sor writes an amazing etude in B minor in which he has melody, middle, and bass all interwoven with a single arpeggio pattern. Very, very cleverly and beautifully done. So the melody begins a little bit like this. And what I want to hear is, while I'm doing the arpeggio, I want to see if that melody will sustain and elongate with ease as I do the other notes, of the accompaniment. So that sounds just fine. Sounds good. Let's listen to the same passage on the rosewood guitar. That's the melody. Here's with accompaniment. So this also sounds very traditional, high-level quality of sound, and each of them has different potentials. I don't particularly prefer one over the other personally, and that's often how it'll be. There's not always clear-cut distinctions that are important between different guitars, other than that they will all be different, and every guitar will sound differently on different pieces of music, and even from day to day, the same guitar, depending on humidity and other unknown factors. To me, guitars, some days they sound splendid, beautiful, perfect, and other days it seems like they didn't want to get out of their case. And so they have that human quality as well in some respects. Okay, so to kind of summarize a little bit, if you're thinking about checking out guitars, take a lot of time, find at least 2 guitars in a similar range of quality, whatever your budget is, and sit and play them. Look at the construction, the kinds of woods. I do recommend that you ask what kind of strings are on the instrument. It needs to have really good strings. I have no problem if it's Savarez, particularly Savarez Alliance, which I like very much. The D'Addario, many people like. I don't use them myself that much, but they can be excellent. And at least know the kind of strings that are on the instrument. Beware, though, that the instrument has strings that have been played in. If the strings are too new, the overtone structure of the string will kind of distort what the quality of the instrument is. On both of these, I've had the strings on here for at least a couple weeks, and they're in good condition, but the sound is settled. So we're going to get kind of a good balance between the quality of the strings and how the strings work with the instrument. It can be a long-term process of, with a good instrument, finding the strings that you like to sound the best. And also, some guitarists, some very accomplished guitarists, tell me that they'll use one kind of string on their guitar for concert playing, and they use a different kind of string in the recording studio. And that makes sense because in the recording studio, the microphones that are close by are going to tend to amplify finger noise on the strings and certain other aspects because of the proximity of the mic to the sound source. Whereas in a hall, you need a certain kind of string that has that great robustness of sound that will carry and sustain through through the whole hall itself and have great presence for the listeners. So there's so much to look at. It's a great thing to do, and I know over the years I've helped many countless students choose new guitars, and that's fun. And so I wish you luck in that. And thanks for tuning into this video. I hope you have found it to be helpful. And again, I do want to thank so much Manuel Rodriguez for his offering to let me have these guitars in my studio for about a month now as I've prepared for doing this, and also to the great people at the Hannabach String Company that supported us with the strings that we're using and so forth. So again, thank you, and hopefully more later. Bye-bye.